Tēnā koutou katoa. My name is Áine. I'm a disabled storyteller and advocate for disability rights and justice. I'm appreciative of the chance to speak to you today, and I do so in my personal capacity. When I got involved in this campaign for accessibility law back in 2017, I honestly did so in part because I was a uni student in need of a summer job. Jobs, of course, are hard to find when you're disabled. The rampant unemployment our community faces is one of many issues on which more robust accessibility standards could and should move the dial. But the other reason I got involved in the campaign was about responsibility. Specifically, I wanted to see Aotearoa take meaningful steps to show us as disabled people who are constantly having to ask again and again for our basic access needs to be met, that this country truly considers access to be a collective endeavour. Law change needs to be part of this beautiful vision. The legal status quo is not. For too long, specifically since 1993 under the Human Rights Act, the burden of proving that, say, I as a disabled person have faced a particular instance of discrimination falls onto me. According to the law, it's not the job of my school or my employer or some bureaucratic or punitive government agency I had to deal with to prove that they did not discriminate. It is my job to find help to manage to legally prove it happened. That is backwards, that is unfair, and that pattern of forcing disabled people to do the heavy lifting for access is exactly what this Labour-led government intends to continue to entrench. In 2022, this government is planning to introduce an accessibility bill with no teeth. Sure, an independent board of disabled people will be in place in part to monitor it, but this government have conveniently neglected to commit to creating independent mechanisms for enforcing that law. They've also neglected to commit to ensuring that new accessibility standards will be developed and enforced. Standards are the detailed instructions for how to make access happen, say in transport or education or media. They are the place where the real mahi happens, as we've seen from many other jurisdictions like the US, Canada, and the EU. This government needs to make sure the proposed bill commits to a robust process for making, monitoring, and independently enforcing accessibility standards in any area where the disability community identifies lots of systemic barriers. If they don't make that commitment, we're likely to continue with a piecemeal approach with no deadlines. This approach risks accessibility improvements inching slowly along. Incremental change might technically be progress, but that doesn't make it acceptable or enough. This law also needs to include a system for us to send in reports of access barriers, in the knowledge that our reports won't just get received, but promptly acted on. This system should make sure that our daily lived experience of access barriers feeds into what accessibility standards look like, so that we see those barriers getting removed. The Minister for Disability Issues has said, this framework will reflect a partnership with disabled people, recognising disabled people as leaders, as experts on accessibility from a lived experience perspective, and as advisors to hold the system to account. Yes, centering disabled leadership and the leadership of Māori disabled in particular is critical. But disabled people have been holding systems that let our community down to account for decades. Successive rounds of disability strategies and action plans resulting in incremental change at best have already taught us a lesson. They have shown us that existing accountability mechanisms like governmental progress reporting and tough questions from disabled people's organisations, disability rights commissioners, and even the Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities are far better than nothing, but they're not enough. That leaves me asking, with no enforcement mechanism or standards, what real power will the proposed Accessibility Governance Board have? And how is this law going to enshrine real systems change to remove barriers for disabled people? As disabled people, we need to be clear that we won't settle for anything less than an accessibility law with the teeth to hold those with power over our access accountable to their responsibilities. Finally, I want to share something personal. Last year on March 21st, I got sick with COVID-19. After a couple of weeks, the initial infection went away, but a long tail of recurring and new symptoms did not. I became one of millions of people around the world and in Aotearoa managing the chronic illness long COVID. I'm telling you this for two reasons. First, we're collectively not very good at talking about the forms of access that disabled people who have non-apparent impairments or conditions or neurodivergence or mental illness need. We might need flexible working or quiet rest spaces or easier ways to prove our conditions or affordable taxi options. And this government needs to pay attention to our access needs in designing the accessibility law too. Second, you just never know when today might be the day you become disabled or more disabled. You might not yet accept the term for yourself, but the disablement caused by our bodies or cultural norms or attitudes and laws is nothing to feel shame about. So let's come together, disabled and not yet disabled, to tell this government that the Accessibility Act framework that they are currently planning on is a massive letdown for disabled people, for our family and whānau, and especially for all those who have campaigned, including as part of the Access Alliance, for this law to be robust and enforceable. Tell this government that now is the time to rewrite their draft bill. Tell them to make sure it commits to an efficient way for barriers to get reported and actioned, and most importantly, accessibility standards with teeth. Tell them now, and tell them again next year when the draft bill goes to a select committee to get our feedback. Together, we can urge this government to take the decisive political leadership and responsibility Aotearoa needs in order to become truly accessible. Thank you.